Okay guys, so after trying this 2 different ways and not succeeding yet, I'm just going to give this a try. We'll see what happens, and if this doesn't work, well, honestly, I guess I'll try another way. So we're looking at why people migrate. So people decide to migrate based on a combination of 2 factors. We have push factors, which are things that induce people to move out of their present locations, and then we have pull factors, which are things that induce people to move into a new location. So there are 3 major types of push and pull factors, and these are political factors, environmental factors, and economic factors. So political factors are things that are especially compelling. These are things that force people to migrate from a country. And the UN High Commission for Refugees recognizes 3 different groups of political migrants, of forced political migrants. So a refugee is someone who has been forced to migrate to avoid a potential threat to his or her life. They're someone who can't return for fear of persecution, and generally not just persecution like, being called names, but someone who will be killed if they return home. So if you think about the current situation with Syria and the civil war that's going on there, the people that are leaving and that are going throughout Europe, and even the people that are coming to the United States, these people will eventually get refugee status because these people can't return home. So then the next group of people are internally displaced people, which is IDP. These are similar to refugees, however, they haven't crossed an international border, so they're still within their home country, but they cannot be where they were in their homes. They just haven't left their countries. And then we have an asylum seeker. So these are people who've migrated to another country in hope of being recognized as a refugee. So actually this is what the situation the Syrians are in. So they don't have refugee status yet, but they will get refugee status once they've been established somewhere. Oh, shoot, sorry. Okay, so this map is really hard to see. Let's see. We can zoom in on it a little bit. So what you're looking at is, I don't know if you can see this. What we're looking at is the countries that are dark and light purple are countries where people have been are the countries that are the source of refugees. So you notice people have come from sub-Saharan Africa, Russia, and then some places in the Middle East, for example, Afghanistan, Turkey, Iraq, and then Myanmar and Vietnam and Asia. And then your green countries are places that people go to. So Canada, the United States, some other African countries, and then some other Middle Eastern countries and India. Then then the yellow countries are countries that are both origins and destinations. So some people leave China, some people go to China, some people leave Sudan, some people go to Sudan. Same with the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And then the countries that have red names are countries where there are more than 100,000 internally displaced people. Okay, let me try and zoom out again. Sorry if that's a little blurry. Whoa, okay. Okay, so we just talked about political factors. Now there are environmental factors that can prompt migration from hazardous environments or can pull migrants to attractive regions. So let's actually talk about the push factors first. So people can leave because of water. So water is the most common environmental threat. Obviously tsunamis, typhoons, hurricanes, all of these things can cause a problem, which would make people want to leave a place. And then additionally on the other side we have droughts, which would be problems that would make people want to leave. And then as pull factors, we have people wanting to go live near mountains, seasides, different climates, like people who want to live where it's warmer. And then you have people who want to live where it's cooler. So people who want to live, like in the mountains, people who want to live where it snows, people who want to be able to ski. So there are environmental factors, which are also an issue. Obviously, these are not going to be as immediate of an issue for people. Certainly as important as like economic or political factors. Okay, so most people migrate for economic reasons. So push factors are going to be people leaving places with few jobs. So if someone gets fired or someone has a situation where they have to leave a place because there aren't any jobs available, or if they have a pull factor like there are jobs available somewhere or their job relocates them, that's a pull factor. The U.S. and Canada have been prominent destinations for economic migrants. So historically, people have come from Europe to the U.S. and Canada to find jobs or to find economic opportunities. And then more recently, people from Latin America and Asia have come to the United States and Canada for economic opportunities. Okay, then we have things that are intervening obstacles. So these are things that might hinder migration. And there are two types. So we have environmental features. So things that literally hinder your migration, like a mountain, which gets in the way, an ocean, which makes it difficult to traverse, or just simply distance. So, you might want to move to Australia, but there's an ocean in the way. It's really far away. That's going to make it difficult to migrate to Australia. But then we have political features. So these are going to be the fact that countries require proper documentation to leave one country and gain entry into another. So you have to have a variety of visas to go to a country. You can have a student visa. You can have like a travel visa. You can't just go to another country and be like, hi, I'm moving here. You have to have documentation in order to do that. And some countries make it easier or harder to come to their country for different opportunities. Some countries don't mind if you come there as a student. Oh, there's a little dog. Look who it is. Hello. He's a puffball. Okay. Some countries make it easier or harder to come there. Some countries make it easier or harder. Hello. Some countries make it easier or harder to stay there. So, and it depends. We'll talk more in just a second about, it depends what you're doing there, of why you can stay. Okay, so countries have adopted selective immigration policies and preferences shown for specific employment placement and family reunification, which means if there's a certain job you can do, you might be given preference. So if there's a job you can do that lots of other people in that country cannot do, if you have job skills that are really unique, let's say you're like a rocket scientist, then you're going to be more likely to stay. Or let's say you're some sort of very specific type of neurosurgeon, something like that, you're going to be more likely to stay. In addition, let's say your whole family is somewhere and you're the only person who's back, like, in that country, then you're going to be more likely to be not invited, but allowed to come over to the country. So in 1921 and 1924, we have two new immigration laws that are passed. The first is the Quota Act, 1921, and then we have the National Origins Act in 1924. So these laws are passed by the U.S. Congress, and they mark the end of unrestricted immigration in the U.S. So prior to this, anybody could come to the U.S. Now, it wasn't as if there weren't any kind of barriers. Of course, when people arrived at Ellis Island, they were, they had all kinds of medical things that were tested. They didn't want people to come in who were sick, or didn't want people to spread diseases. So there were things that were done at Ellis Island. But other than that, things were not as restricted. So you might think about what happened in 1921, 1924. See if you can think of anything that would have changed immigration laws. So more people seek admission to the U.S. than is permitted by quotas. So preference is shown for family reunification. And about 3/4 of people who come into the U.S., 3/4 of immigrants do so because of family reunification. And then about 1/4 of immigrants do so because they are skilled workers. So these are people who are sent by countries who allegedly have countries allegedly have a preference for skilled workers, and this contributes to what's called the brain drain, which means that there's a disproportionate amount of highly skilled and intelligent citizens migrating away from their sending countries. So the idea a lot of times is that, parents or families will send their very bright or promising children to go to college in another country to be educated there, and then the intent is that that child will bring that education back to their home country to either help people medically or help people scientifically, or somehow spread that what they've learned back to their homeland. And a lot of times that doesn't happen. A lot of times they stay wherever they've gone and they don't spread what they've learned. They stay to where they have immigrated, and so thus it's a brain drain. They take that smartness with them and stay there. Then diversity is also an issue. A few immigrants are admitted to countries just because there aren't many people that are already from that country, historically, that have come from that country, and so they're like, we don't have many of you guys, so come on in. You guys have, we don't have a quota on you, so you guys can come in. Okay, unauthorized immigrants are those who enter a country without proper documents. So characteristics of unauthorized immigrants in the U.S. So most of them, roughly 58% of these people emigrate from Mexico. And then there's a significant portion not a significant portion, but many of them are children. So of the 11.2 million unauthorized immigrants, nearly 1 million of these are children. Now, what happens is, of the unauthorized immigrants, many of them have given birth. So they come to the United States, and then once they are here, their children are born. So there are 4.5 million children in the U.S. Who are U.S. citizens. So there are 4.5 children whose parents are undocumented immigrants, and those children are U.S. citizens. So the question is, what happens if their parents get sent home? What happens to those children who are legal U.S. citizens? Okay, so this graph here, the red line shows us the total number of immigrants. The green line shows us those immigrants who are just from Mexico, and the blue line shows us the number of immigrants that are from other countries. So you can see there's definitely a significant portion who are from Mexico, and then about not quite half of the other immigrants come from other countries. So let's look at the number of years in the U.S. So we're still looking at unauthorized immigration. So of unauthorized immigrants, the duration of residency has increased. In 2010, 35% of adults had been in the U.S. for at least 15 years. Approximately 8 million unauthorized immigrants are employed in the U.S. And Texas and California have the largest number of unauthorized immigrants, which you might guess. So this shows us a map. I don't know if you guys can see this very well, but this shows us a map of where immigrants are generally coming from and to. So you can see the border of Mexico over to Texas right here, New Mexico, and then here's California. Okay, so sorry, I'm getting you dizzy. My cousin is in the Border Patrol. I wish I would make it clearer. There we go. Maybe a little better. Not really. Okay, my cousin is a Border Patrol officer in San Diego, which we can't see. I can't see. Can you? Your eyes are younger than mine. Anyway, she's a Border Patrol officer in San Diego. And she works on the border right down here. She's going to be guarding the Pope soon. That's pretty cool. I don't know if I'm allowed to tell you that. I mean, never mind. You didn't hear anything about that. So I'm going to see her pretty soon. Maybe I can do a little interview with her and she can tell me some things about what it's like to work for the Border Patrol. Okay, so Mexico's border with the United States. So the U.S. kind of recognizes motives that compel unauthorized immigrants to enter illegally. The U.S. recognizes that there are employment opportunities in the U.S. that do not exist in Mexico. The U.S. recognizes that there is the issue of family reunification, that there are people that have come from Mexico and they want their family members to be here with them. And the U.S. recognizes that there is a better way of life in the United States for many people. Now, the view from Mexico, how Mexicans view the situation, is a bit more complex. So there are essentially two views. People in the north, in the northern part of Mexico, they are wishing that people in the United States would be compassionate and would kind of be kind to people who are unauthorized immigrants from Mexico to the United States. Then there are people in southern Mexico. People from southern Mexico are not quite as tolerant, not quite as compassionate to the people who are immigrating into Mexico from Guatemala. So the people in southern Mexico are kind of feeling that same influx of people that the people in the United States are feeling from Mexico, if that makes sense. So there's a bit of a difference of opinion from northern to southern Mexico. Okay, so if you've never been to a border crossing, this is what one of the border crossings from the United States to Mexico looks like. So I've been to Mexico, but I went on a plane, so I didn't have this experience. And I've gone to Canada, but I went when I was much younger, and it was before 9/11, and you didn't have to have a passport or anything. I just had to tell them what city I was born in. But I'll tell you this, one of the guys on the trip, they asked him what city he was born in, and he said, Columbus, Ohio, and they wouldn't let him in. I don't know why. I don't know if they thought like he was sassy, but they didn't let him in. And I was in New York last summer, and I was in Niagara Falls, and I couldn't go over to the Canadian side because I didn't have a passport. So now you have to have a passport. Now you'll notice here, there's a little tank situation going on. I did not see any tanks on the Canadian side, like going into Canada. So things are a little different on this end. But there you go. Okay, so here are some immigration concerns in the U.S. Now, this says most people view immigration in the U.S. Most people are ambivalent. I don't know if I agree with that. I'm kind of curious if you guys think most people are ambivalent. It says, regarding the border patrol, most people would like a more effective border control, but they don't want to spend more money to solve the issue. I think that's probably accurate, that people definitely don't want to spend more money on the issue. That some people want more of a fence or a wall, but they definitely don't want to spend more money for it. Or some people want more border patrol officers, but they're not willing to pay more money for that. And then this says most people recognize that unauthorized immigrants take jobs from U.S. citizens, but they understand most citizens wouldn't take the job, so they support a path to U.S. citizenship for those unauthorized immigrants. I don't know that that's accurate. I don't know that most people recognize that. I'm curious what you guys think. If you think most Kentuckians recognize that. I don't know that I have an accurate representation of what most people think, given that I talk to a lot of 15-year-olds and not a lot, a really wide spread of people. So I'm really curious what you guys think. Okay, civil rights. It says U.S. citizens favor letting law enforcement officials stop and verify the legal status of anyone, but they fear civil rights will be infringed upon of U.S. citizens as a result of racial profiling. What do you guys think of this? And then if you look down to this issue in Arizona, Arizona had this law, and it began to spread out to other states, but I think it stopped because of the kind of the backlash Arizona had. Arizona had this law that allowed I guess, police officers to essentially ask anyone for their documentation that said that they were a citizen, or to ask them for their green card or their visa or whatever documentation that they had. And if any of you have been to Arizona, you know that most people in Arizona have some sort of pigment, whether they're Native American or Hispanic. So it's a bit difficult to go around asking everyone you see where they're from and where their documentation is. Also, historically, if we look back a little bit, governments that are always asking people for their papers aren't governments we really want to be like. So, that left a bad taste in people's mouths. So the polls, this says polls suggest U.S. citizens believe unauthorized immigration is a pressing matter in the nation, but it should only be dealt with at the federal level and not at the local level. So people were not real happy with Arizona's law. More than 100 localities across the nation support additional rights for unauthorized immigrants, such as a movement known as Sanctuary City. I'm really curious what you guys think about this, because I don't get the impression that people do feel this way. However, I think a lot of what I read is on Facebook, and again from people in class, and so I think maybe I get a skewed impression of what's really going on. Okay, so this shows you some immigration within Europe, and what you'll see is that there's a lot of migration from Poland to Germany, and then from Romania to Spain, and from Romania to Italy. So in Europe, we have a population growth in Europe that's fueled by immigration from other regions of the world. This is a trend that's disliked by many Europeans. The biggest fear is that the countries that people are immigrating to will lose their culture, because immigrants will bring in different religions, they'll bring in different languages, they'll bring in different food and different culture. So there's a lot of hostility to immigrants. And that's actually this hostility has become a central plank of political parties in European countries, which is interesting, because I think that is has become a touch that's been brought up a bit in the United States lately. So immigrants are blamed for crime, they're blamed for unemployment, and they're blamed for high welfare costs. Again, I think that's come up in the United States. So at the top, this is a pro-immigration march. And then down here, this is an anti-immigration poster. This one's bigger. This one's smaller. This guy looks really grumpy. Okay. So Europeans as immigrants. There is an inhospitable climate for immigrants in Europe, and that's especially ironic, right? Because Europe was the source of most of the world's immigrants during the 19th century. Most Europeans fear losing their cultural heritage to that of new immigrants, while Indo-European languages are now spoken in half of the world. We're going to talk about language in the next unit, which will be really fun. And those languages are spoken in half of the world because of European immigrants. And Christianity has the world's largest number of adherents again because of that immigration. And European art, music, literature, and philosophy and ethics have diffused throughout the world, again, because Europeans have immigrated everywhere. Oh, I pushed the button. I didn't mean to do that. Okay. So what are some characteristics of migrants? So migrants, remember good old Ravenstein. he says most long-distance migrants are white. They are adults rather than children, and they are young adults who are looking for work. So they're not children, they're not elderly, but they're like young, white. No, does it say white? I just randomly put white in there. They're young, male adults. Okay. And there are more males migrated to the U.S. during the 19th century and most of the 20th century. So the gender reversed in the 1990s when women constituted about 55% of U.S. migrants. Most likely this is a reflection of the changing role of women in Mexican society. About 40% of immigrants in the U.S. are young adults between the ages of 25 and 39. Recent immigrants to the U.S. tend to be less educated than U.S. citizens, which makes sense. I mean, when you're moving around, trying to find a job, trying to take care of your family, it's a little difficult to go to school. However, you don't want to always rely on that stereotype, because remember, we've got the brain drain situation where we have people who are coming over because they are so smart and they're going to school because they are the cream of the crop. So on a global scale, let's summarize a bit. On a global scale, the largest flows of immigrants are from Asia to Europe and from Latin America to the U.S. Now, this says third world to first world, but third world and first world are really not appropriate terms anymore. So we're going to use developing to developed. And the decision to migrate is a conclusion influenced by a mixture of push and pull. So push factors are ones that make you want to leave somewhere, and pull factors are things that make you want to go somewhere. And migrants face obstacles in migrating not as much by environmental factors anymore, but by political or cultural factors. So it's, even though if a tsunami comes, that is definitely going to be an issue for you. It's more of an issue if someone is, trying to kill you through a civil war or through genocide. That's going to affect you more greatly. Okay, so worldwide, the most prominent types of interregional migration is from rural areas to urban areas. So people are moving from farms to cities. Then in the U.S., it's from cities to suburbs. Americans and Europeans share mixed views about immigration. They recognize their importance to the local economy, but key features of immigration trouble them. And that's the end.